It's been one of the worst years in living memory for Australian commercial television.
Did you just blow Bruce and Channel 7 up?
The avalanche started with allegations that Channel 7's flagship current affairs program, Spotlight, covered the cost of sex workers and cocaine to secure a blockbuster interview. How did you feel about the generosity extended to Bruce Lehrmann by Channel 7?
Mortified, angry and embarrassed.
But it goes much deeper. A Four Corners investigation has found the dysfunction at Channel 7 is far more insidious and widespread. Two of the people we spoke to were so disturbed by what they witnessed, they spoke out despite being still on the 7 payroll.
It is one of the most degrading, soul-crushing places you can work in.
Be first to know every day.
Look, everyone knows that TV's all smoke and mirrors. We all put on a show. But underneath the surface, it can be very dark.
A vicious culture encouraged by some managers.
The character in the play we've written wants to bash your head the fuck in with a cricket bat. Fucking lost the talent. You cunt.
Channel 7 likes to portray itself as a family. It's a very dysfunctional family.
We've uncovered multiple cases of discrimination, harassment and bullying. There are currently 3 legal complaints with 7 brought by staff for discrimination in the Sydney News Division alone.
This is an industry that Me Too forgot.
I wouldn't just call it the second chance club, I'd call it the third, fourth and fifth chance club.
We've spoken to more than 200 people for this Four Corners investigation. The stories many tell are concerning. People describe being harassed, assaulted, viciously bullied at 7 West Media. Some have ended up in hospital, unable to work. Some became suicidal. The dominant emotion I've encountered over the past few months is fear. People are frightened about speaking out because, they say, they've seen the way that others have been crushed. I first began to understand this culture at 7 years ago, when I discovered the story of a young cadet journalist from Adelaide, Amy Torber. Back then, Amy Torber's family described how she had alleged sexual harassment by a man in her workplace.
Amy, can you tell me what happened at Channel 7?
I'm sorry, I can't.
How does that make you feel?
It's frustrating because there's a lot I could say. It's not a nice feeling to be silenced.
Amy Torber can't discuss what led to her NDA, but she can talk more generally about the notion of media companies gagging former employees.
It is a little bit odd, isn't it, that, the media is about exposing injustices and telling people's stories and not shying away from it. But I suppose if you look at it in that respect, NDAs are there to silence people and to stop them from exposing injustices.
In an organisation that's supposed to be about finding the truth.
Yeah. Exactly.
Amy Torber is not the only person silenced by this powerful media company.
So one of the paradoxes about the commercial news industry is that while they are ostensibly there to report matters of public interest, they try and suppress any matters of public interest that might affect their brand adversely. And they do that through the use of NDAs.
Non-disclosure agreements.
Non-disclosure agreements.
We tried to speak to former 7 staff who had made complaints including being terminated while on maternity leave, bullying and sexual harassment, and some who had just been let go in sudden redundancies, only to discover that 7 had signed them up to agreements that gagged them forever. Solicitor Josh Bornstein is currently acting for numerous commercial television clients, including from Channel 7, and says NDAs are common practice.
What the NDAs do is mask the reality of a brutal workplace culture in which women particularly are mistreated very badly and routinely.
Have you heard about people being hospitalised because of what's happening to them at work?
Yes, I have.
Have you heard about people being fired on maternity leave?
Yes.
Have you heard about people attempting suicide or having suicidal thoughts?
Unfortunately, yes.
Have you heard about people being sexually harassed?
Repeatedly.
So what does this all say about these workplaces?
That this is an industry that Me Too forgot.
The Torber family explained that when Amy had complained to management about sexual harassment, 7 Human Resources turned on her, doing a deep dive into Amy's emails and confronting her with allegations they'd never raised before. Other Human Resources professionals who worked at 7 remember Amy's case well and were appalled at what was done to her.
This was a tool, this was a widely used tool, a tactic, an approach internally. My experience working there...
This former HR worker knows of other cases where this tool was used against innocent staff. We're interviewing her via a Zoom call because even speaking out anonymously is a risk. She's seen firsthand the tactics management uses.
Were you, when you were at Channel 7, instructed to go through staff emails in order to be weaponised against that staff member?
Yes.
How did you feel about doing that?
In reflection and now, having the experience I do have in my career, I feel sick to my stomach and I feel like it's a gross misuse of internal policies that are intended to be there for ethical reasons and kind of a warping of those policies to suit, again, an orchestrated end result.
Now, did you stand by everything you said in your affidavit?
Perhaps the most famous Channel 7 whistleblower came to the Federal Court of Australia during accused rapist Bruce Lehrmann's defamation proceedings against Channel 10. His name was Taylor Auerbach. Journalist Samantha Maiden broke the story.
I think the moment where I nearly fell off my chair was when I got the receipts.
Mr. Auerbach, a former Spotlight producer and so-called Lehrmann babysitter, told the court he used his boss Mark Llewellyn's corporate card to pay for $10,000 worth of Thai massages. Mr. Auerbach later paid it back. The court heard Mr. Lehrmann allegedly later invoiced 7 for sex workers and cocaine.
So you look at the receipts and what's the feeling going through your mind?
Well, I thought, it's not what I've ever paid for a massage.
Bruce Lehrmann denied Taylor Auerbach's allegations as vehemently as he did the accusations of rape. Taylor Auerbach offered to resign from Spotlight.
I've let you down, I've let the show down, and I'm devastated. Last night and early this morning, in a drunken daze, I put thousands upon thousands of charges on the corporate credit card for something that had nothing to do with work.
But Mr. Auerbach gave evidence his boss Mark Llewellyn refused his resignation.
That was the end of that. I mean, they went to Tasmania, they played a bit of golf, and they continued whining, dining and wooing Mr. Lerman in the hope that they would get, you know, the documents and the material and the interview that they needed to put together a blockbuster piece of television.
Spending more money on this man who the federal court in a civil context has now found is a rapist.
That's correct.
Mark Llewellyn was executive producer at Spotlight, and in the commercial news business, everyone knows his name.
We need to make noise and we need to get the big interviews and we need to be seen to be doing that. We're not here to just sort of be middle of the road. Middle of the road, you get run over.
In court, Spotlight was described as inhabiting a perverse universe, in which one lavish dinner famously included a $361 tomahawk steak. The program also spent more than $100,000 on a year's rent for Mr. Lerman.
Now he's breaking his silence in a 7 News Spotlight exclusive.
Let's light some fires.
You really have a system of two worlds. And in one world, you know, you have a whole bunch of producers and even reporters that are on very modest wages, you know, with no job security, who are completely beholden for these gods of the industries for their job. And then over in the Spotlight corner, you have someone ka-chinging the credit card for the tomahawk steak. I mean, it's not, they're not operating in the same universe.
The public revelations about that universe led to Mark Llewellyn's swift resignation.
But the poisonous culture at Spotlight went far deeper than what was heard here at the federal court. Four Corners has obtained a stream of disturbing text messages to Taylor Auerbach from his boss, Mark Llewellyn. Messages that haven't been made public until now.
The messages formed part of Taylor Auerbach's workers' compensation claim against Channel 7. And crucially, the network knew about them last August, a full 8 months before Mark Llewellyn resigned. In one, described by Mr. Auerbach's lawyer as anti-Semitic, Mr. Llewellyn mocks Mr. Auerbach's striped shirt as looking like concentration camp pyjamas.
Why is he wearing the Holocaust gym jams?
Taylor Auerbach is Jewish. Mr. Llewellyn wrote, following up, that Mr. Auerbach was...
And Frankenstein.
In a photograph, Mr. Llewellyn can be seen with a handwritten note he had signed, which says...
Fucking lost the talent. You cunt.
Another series of messages repeatedly refer to violent acts.
Is this it, you cunt? I'm going to cave your head in, said the character in the play we're writing. The character in the play we've written wants to bash your head the fuck in with a cricket bat.
In reference to a blue pencil, Mr. Llewellyn wrote...
Or the red pencil, or purple, or LGBTQI rainbow pencil, whichever cuts your prolix prose to digestible chunks before I cave your head in with my heavy fucking iPhone, said the character in the play we're writing.
At the time, Taylor Auerbach did not convey his distress at these messages and dismissed them with humour. Taylor Auerbach signed a non-disclosure agreement, and our story team has had no contact with him for this investigation. 7 declined repeated interview requests. It didn't answer why it kept Mr. Llewellyn in his job for 8 months after discovering these messages, but said more generally,
inappropriate behaviour will not be tolerated at 7.
Mark Llewellyn said in a statement,
a narrative has been created that is simply untrue. That narrative has now been accepted by many as fact. I absolutely rejected those allegations then, and I continue to reject them now. Ultimately, I resigned from the show I founded and loved, and no longer work with the team I adored. I categorically deny engaging in any conduct that is anti-Semitic or which constitutes bullying, discrimination or misconduct, nor did I know about, condone, encourage, suggest or approve the buying of drugs and sex workers on the Channel 7 card.
There had been warning signs about Mark Llewellyn's behaviour before. A decade earlier, when he ran the Sunday night program, he assaulted a producer. Four Corners can reveal these pictures of the producer right after Llewellyn attacked him in his office, ripping the entire front of the producer's shirt. We've spoken to multiple Sunday night staff there that day who were shocked by what had happened. Mr. Llewellyn was moved off the program, but he was later brought back to run Spotlight.
I suppose the way they treat people and the depths that they will go to.
Spotlight was this woman's workplace. The journalist has launched a sexual discrimination case against 7.
It's daunting and it's horrible, but sometimes you're left with no choice, really.
Like the HR worker and so many others we have spoken to for this story, she is afraid. The journalist is one of Josh Bornstein's clients.
The fear is visceral. The fear of losing their job, but also losing their career. If they dare to speak up, if they dare to be seen to speak up and challenge what's going on, that's a visceral fear.
Mr. Bornstein's client witnessed what she describes as a profoundly sexist workplace.
I mean, when I look through some of your documents, there are some pretty shocking allegations in here. I mean, the one that really stood out for me was where you go into an edit suite and there's a lurid picture on the wall. What was that picture?
So it was of a woman with her legs spread, and there was a very detailed drawing of a vagina and it was dripping. I just found that completely inappropriate and gross.
The journalist doesn't accuse Mark Llewellyn of approving of this picture and doesn't know if he saw it.
This isn't like years and years ago.
Oh, no, it was in 2022.
While some Spotlight men were living large, their female colleagues' complaint to 7 recalls a very different experience for her on the program.
She consistently worked 10 to 12-hour days, 7 days a week.
While her senior male colleagues
left the office for hours at a time to dine and consume alcohol at various restaurants in Martin Place. Upon their return to the office, they frequently appeared significantly affected by alcohol.
She says one male colleague, not Mark Llewellyn, blew the production budget on an overseas trip, drank so much he was
lying on the ground in the gutter.
And said on one occasion of a victim of sexual assault,
Hey, your job is just to get this bitch's story.
She had to spend her own money to finish the story, and when she came home, she says she couldn't afford her rent.
It was incredibly stressful. You're constantly just trying to keep all these plates in the air, but it's impossible.
The plates dropped when the woman became extremely unwell. But, she says, she was expected to continue to work at night and on weekends.
I was literally vomiting and coughing during a family dinner and coughing up these wobs of blood.
She went to see a doctor.
And I just started sobbing because the pressure of going home and not going back to the office and what the retribution would be if I did that was so great that I just sobbed in this doctor's office. And she said, if you don't go home now, you're going to be in bed with pneumonia for 6 weeks. This is really, really serious. And I'll call an ambulance to your office if I have to. You are sick. I got to the point where I was suicidal. And I remember I In one particularly dark moment where I'd worked all weekend and I rang Lifeline and I made a doctor's appointment because I knew I was so close to taking my own life and I had a child that I couldn't do that to because I was a single parent.
Both off-air and on, 7 have been staunchly supportive of men under siege, spending millions on their legal fees, or platforming their stories, or giving them jobs and second chances. Shareholder activist Stephen Mayne has shares in 7.
I mean, let's go through the list. There's Ben Robert-Smith, found by a civil court to be a war criminal. Bruce Lehrmann, found by a civil court to be a rapist. Ben Cousins, currently on Dancing with the Stars, found by a court to be a stalker, 10 months in jail. What do you think this says about the culture and values of this organisation?
Well, I think it's a very poor culture. It is a second chance club, the last chance saloon for blokes behaving badly. So if they're loyal, there does seem to be a culture of stand by your man.
For a long time, that culture also existed at Channel 9, which is having a reckoning of its own following the departure of news director Darren Wick after multiple allegations of sexual harassment, which he denies. And there have been allegations of sexual harassment at other media organisations too, including the ABC. Out in regional Queensland, at the bottom of the 7 pecking order, are young TV reporters like Olivia Babb.
I grew up watching TV. I lived in a really small town, so we had like all these beautiful news presenters that would talk about stories, and I thought when I got the job at 7, people are gonna see my name and they're gonna think like I'm a TV journo.
But when we meet her, the gloss has come off the television world.
What kind of world is it?
One where women still don't get to speak. I worked my bum off to get here. I'm the first person in my family to go to university. I changed my career in my 30s to something that I thought would give voices to people, but I didn't know it would take away my voice.
Good girl, Sadie.
Like many of the young female reporters we spoke to off camera, Olivia is on low pay. She needed a second job to survive. She was earning under $60,000 a year.
I could go and work at Guzman and Gomez for no stress, and I could earn more. I could go to McDonald's and earn more money. I don't have spare money, and it's mortifying. It's embarrassing. We did a story the other day, and one of my talents said, we're all 1 or 2 paychecks away from homelessness. That's me.
How did you feel about the generosity extended to Bruce Lehrmann by Channel 7?
Mortified, angry, and embarrassed.
Olivia Babb believes the public backing of men like Bruce Lehrmann is symptomatic of the way women are viewed at Channel 7 behind closed doors.
Do you really think Me Too has made any difference to 7? I have never seen anything come through that makes us think that it even happened, that 7 even knew about Me Too. I've been harassed at work. I've been verbally assaulted. I've been put in situations where I don't feel safe multiple times. This cameraman got in my face and told me, I don't like you, I hate you, you are a shit person. And I will never forget it.
I mean, people have this idea about what it's like to work in commercial television. What's it really like?
It is one of the most degrading, soul-crushing places you can work in. I feel like sometimes I'm dying on the inside when I go to work every day. And I know it sounds dramatic and it sounds like, you know, it's not that bad, but it adds up. And I just don't know if it's worth it. You know, like, I chose this job because I wanted to give people voices and I wanted to make a difference and prove to myself that I could do something really great in this world. But for the past 2 years, I just feel like I've been treated so badly.
In Sydney, a young female journalist also began to unravel. She ended up in hospital and couldn't work for more than a year. She's now suing the network and documented what she says took place in a chronology for her lawyer, including persistent sexual harassment by a cameraman, leading her to text her then boss,
"That fucker scares me and is most uncomfortable to work with. He's creepy and inappropriate."
Her boss bans her from wearing glasses on camera because the network news director says they make her
look like fucking Buddy Holly. Don't fucking wear them again.
And 23 occasions where she's worked long hours, often on traumatic stories, only to be forced to hand her work to a male reporter. 7 did not comment on the woman's case, but the journalist's lawyer, Josh Bornstein, has seen many other commercial TV women undermined in this way.
There's an enormous hostility to women. If that's not misogyny, well, what is?
My experience working there...
7's former HR professional says she witnessed the sexist culture too.
There felt and there appeared to be a real disregard for any type of workplace policy or process or practice that supported gender equality. There was a real sexualisation of women, definitely in the newsroom.
How so? What types of comments did you hear men make about women?
Look, there was very strong commentary and ongoing commentary around the size of a woman's breasts.
Multiple sources volunteer the story of a young woman who had a difficult time with several colleagues at 7 News in Sydney.
Channel 7 has ruined me.
The young woman texted to a friend,
"I'm a good person. I don't deserve this. It has broken me."
Later, she forwarded text messages to colleagues that she'd received from senior Sydney reporter Robert Avadia. The young woman, half Mr. Avadia's age, is depicted as a pole dancer in a catsuit brandishing a whip, sitting in a cocktail glass, reclining on a chaise lounge. In other texted images, Mr. Avadia is a scantily clad warrior and the superhero Thor. When 7 appointed a new news director, Anthony DeSegli, after a string of resignations in April, including Mark Llewellyn and 7's CEO, Robert Avadia became a focus of attention for the network. On the 7th of June, Robert Avadia was abruptly placed on leave, and the network announced an investigation into allegations of inappropriate behaviour. Robert Avadia released a statement too, denying any former or current colleague had made a complaint about him, calling the claims false and malicious and saying they would be defended. Soon after, Robert Avadia confirmed he had been sacked. He responded on his Instagram account by publishing messages of support from 3 former Channel 7 women. Other women have since contacted Four Corners, alleging unprofessional conduct by Mr Avadia. Mr Avadia is suing Seven for unfair dismissal and told Four Corners through his lawyer that he
has not engaged in misconduct or inappropriate conduct or conduct that was unwelcome and unsolicited, justifying summary termination of his employment or otherwise.
Seven declined to comment on the record on Robert Avadia, but in a more general reply to all of our questions, it said,
individuals who have displayed behaviour not reflective of Seven's values have been removed from the organisation. Under new management, we have refreshed and recommunicated our policies and procedures, and we encourage all Seven team members to call out any behaviour that does not reflect the values of Seven.
It's not just women who say they cop it in this culture.
Why are you speaking out?
Because if you don't speak out, nothing gets changed, you know? Things need to change.
Producer Matthew McGrain has worked for Seven in Sydney for 22 years. He's still employed by the network.
I never, ever expected that I would be the case study in a story that I would usually be producing or reporting on.
Matthew McGrain has been using a wheelchair for more than 2 decades. Getting home from work was fine when he was in the company's CBD studios. But then Seven moved to the inner Sydney suburb of Everleigh, and Matthew was on a shift for the Sunrise program that went till midnight every night.
It's not a place that you would want to be in the dark, at night, in a wheelchair, by yourself. It's dark. There aren't many people around. It's a very lonely place to be, as I discovered.
There were no buses at Everleigh after 11 p.m, and wheelchair-accessible taxis were scarce at that time. So Matthew McGrain says management let him leave at 9 p.m. and log back on to finish his shift at home. But 3 months in, he had an accident on the way to the bus.
It was 9:30 p.m. I'd left the building. It was dark, it was raining, there was a gap in the footpath and my wheels got caught. I came flying out, I landed extremely awkwardly, ended up breaking my lower arm. As I came out, my face dragged along the pavement. I could feel my teeth scraping along the footpath because they'd actually gone through my lip. I was in agonising pain. I was howling like a dog. I'd actually ripped all the muscles off the bone, and they had to drill a hole into my arm to reattach the muscles.
With just one functioning limb, Matthew McGrain was stuck at home, unable to care for himself for 10 weeks. He filed a workers' compensation claim to pay for a carer. Even though his injury occurred while he was still on his shift, Channel 7 told the insurer there was no formal agreement allowing Matthew to split his shift.
I just could not believe that that had been communicated to the insurance company and that the insurance company was using that as the reason to deny me my compensation claim.
How did that make you feel that that happened?
Abandoned, hurt, completely in disbelief that this would happen.
Matthew McGrain is suing Seven for disability discrimination. Seven did not provide on-the-record answers to our questions. To understand the essence of 7 West Media, you have to go to its centre of power, Perth. For the better part of 2 decades, Mark Gibson was a TV star of Channel 7 Perth.
Good morning, it is 6 on this Wednesday morning, and wasn't it nice to have some rain on the roof last night?
He's now an ABC radio presenter.
Then listen to this, more than 500,000... I've decided to speak out, I guess, because I don't want to be the person who stays silently complicit in this sort of behaviour. This sort of behaviour in a workplace needs to be called out and it needs to be changed.
Our investigation has exposed many instances where Seven management has ignored repeated complaints about senior men's behaviour towards staff. More often than not, those men kept their jobs, and if they didn't, they'd later be given a second chance. When Mark Gibson was at the network, he witnessed this firsthand with his former boss, Sean Menegola.
I witnessed Sean Menegola's behaviour as being very irrational, often aggressive, verbally abusive, bullying, harassing, belittling. Not only was Sean very verbally abusive towards me, I saw it with other staff. I saw him swearing at staff, abusing staff. I witnessed on 2 occasions him punching the wall in his office in absolute anger. Clearly this was a man with anger issues. They were raised by staff and they were ignored.
This story starts back in 2008, when Gibson and his colleagues felt compelled to complain about this behaviour.
So Chris Wharton, as the managing director at the time, was very aware of this behaviour by Sean. And it got to a point where we just said, hey, we can't work like this anymore and we can't work under these conditions. Members of staff at Channel 7 Perth wrote out in their own words why they could not work in a newsroom under Sean Menegola anymore.
Chris Wharton took the staff's concerns to management.
And Chris Wharton assured me that that would be sorted. Those were the sorts of words he used. This will be sorted. Mate, you've got nothing to worry about. He will be gone.
But he wasn't gone.
Well, in fact, a couple of hours later, Chris Wharton rang me emotionally and said, I'm so sorry. I feel like I've failed you. I'm so sorry, but no, he can retain his job.
Mark Gibson felt it was now impossible for him to continue at 7, and he tried to resign, but management refused to let him.
I mean, that's where things just get even weirder.
Mark Gibson then discovered he was being followed.
I received confirmation that Channel 7 had hired private investigators to follow my every move.
Why had they done that?
My only assumption at the time was that they thought I was going to defect to another network. I mean, it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing.
Mark Gibson went to work for another part of the network. 3 years later, in the face of persistent complaints, Sean Menegola's contract as news director was not renewed. In a statement, Mr Menegola acknowledged there were staff complaints which were
addressed and resolved years earlier,
but said,
my departure from 7 Perth in 2011 was in no way related to staff complaints.
He said,
claims that I would yell, scream and bully are not reflective of my management style.
2 years later, in 2013, Sean Menegola was hired to run Channel 9 News Perth. Mia Brankoff was a reporter at 9.
The stories were rife of people saying how he's difficult to be around, he's an angry man, all sorts of stuff. And then once he'd started, he'd walk into the office and you could sense it. Just like the hairs on the back of your neck would stand up. I mean, it's like this, it's just a sinking feeling. Like, what's coming? What's on the cards today?
Four Corners has spoken to many of Mia Brankov's former colleagues.
Some of these people, they're too scared to even bring it back up again because it's such a dark, dark time in their lives.
Good afternoon, Mia Brankov with you.
Mia decided to quit. Just like Mark Gibson, she says she wasn't allowed to because Mr. Menegola wouldn't accept her resignation letter.
He exploded. He said, "You effing young journos, you sign these contracts and you think you can just walk away from them. Look at you standing there with your arms crossed like a brat, just spraying me." And I, for whatever reason, had it in me to spray him right back. I was beyond frustrated. I was angry, I was upset, I was in tears, and I just called him a cunt.
Mia Brankov finished her work that day, resigned, and eventually walked away from journalism. Mr. Menegola said he
achieved an enormous amount at 9 Perth in a short time.
And he
enjoyed working with the team.
I look back on that and I think, who has the right to have that much power over that many lives? I wanted it more than anything in the world.
Mia Brankov and Mark Gibson were astonished to discover what happened next.
I can remember where I was on the day in 2018 when word filtered through Channel 7 Perth that Sean Menegola had been rehired by 7. He's been promoted. He's being moved to Melbourne to run the newsroom over there. And I remember it so well because the looks on people's faces, people just going, what? How on earth could he be rehired? He had a litany of complaints against him. It is beyond belief.
By some staff accounts, Sean Menegola mellowed during his time in Melbourne, and we spoke to some people who enjoyed working for him there. He resigned from 7 this year, saying he had left
newsrooms with many lasting relationships. I'm proud of what we achieved as a team to take the Bulletin to number 1 after many years trailing the opposition.
Mr. Menegola said in his statement.
One of the other people that we've spoken to for this story has coined a phrase, the Second Chance Club, for a particular group of men in regards to Channel 7.
I wouldn't just call it the Second Chance Club, I'd call it the Third, Fourth and Fifth Chance Club.
Perhaps the most troubling story we've uncovered during this investigation is of a young woman in the Brisbane newsroom. She says she was working extremely long hours and constantly rostered on weekends for a base salary just above the minimum wage. She says she began to suffer from crippling anxiety and decided to resign, but she was told the company wouldn't allow it.
This is how the young woman described to me how she felt about her treatment at the network and her sense of being extremely trapped in the job. The only way I can describe it is I felt like I had a noose around my neck. I felt like I was in a domestic violence relationship with Channel 7.
On Friday, March the 8th this year, the young woman's shaken colleague made contemporaneous notes of what he had just witnessed happen to her. Four Corners has those notes.
10:45, received call from wailing, hysterical, incredibly emotional. Couldn't understand what she was saying apart from, they won't let me go, I've fucked up my career, I want to be hit by a car.
2 minutes later, the young woman hung up and management was informed.
Because this happened only a few months ago, it's still too distressing for the young woman to speak on camera. But these are her words to me. I just spiralled. I saw a car driving towards me up the road. I ran in front of it and hoped that it would hit me. I was uncontrollably sobbing, so I ran out in front of that car. It stopped. I kept running to try and find another car. I saw the edge of the cliff at Mount Cootha, and I jumped. I tumbled down the hill through the bush.
At 10:50, her colleague took a call from another 7 employee who had just seen what had happened.
He says she tried to jump in front of his car and he was now following her into bushland on the other side of studios.
The men ran towards the bushland where she'd thrown herself down the hill.
11:10, 2 ambulance teams arrive.
The young woman was taken to hospital and never returned to work at 7. 7 declined to comment on this woman's case, but it said in a general statement in response to our story,
"We have taken action to address the issues that have been raised, and we are currently undertaking a reset of the culture. We want to be clear that the actions of some individuals do not reflect the values, behaviour and attitudes of the network as a whole."
There are so many terrible stories we know about at 7, but we can't tell them because of the fear that a media company has instilled in the journalists that have gone to work for it every day.
It's one thing to be treated badly, it's another thing to see perpetrators of bad behaviour getting away with it. Perpetrators of bad behaviour are being promoted. It's crushing, it's soul destroying, and it has an effect on an awful lot of people.
The toll is absolutely tragic. It's unlike any industry I've encountered in over 25 years of legal practice, which is why I think this is an industry that's ripe for the Human Rights Commission to intervene as the cop on the beat. There's clearly significant problems in the industry. There are numerous women coming forward, but to date, the cop on the beat is nowhere to be seen.
I want to be the type of journalist that fights for young women, that speaks out. I will never be able to work at 7 again, but I don't want to work at 7.
Olivia Babb resigned from Channel 7 after our interview. She's looking for another job.
You're being very good.
They know what they're doing to us. They know everything. They don't care. They really don't. No one cares. It's all just a big boys' club.
If this program has raised concerns for you, you can contact one of these services.